Hey there, welcome to Mike's Collection, episode 381. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my latest G.I. Joe classified figures. Now, if you're a regular to my channel, you know that I've been collecting this line since the beginning. This year started off really slow for G.I. Joe classified figures. I think we had 4, maybe 6 figures for the first 6 months. And then they've been coming on fast and furious for the second half of the year. I sat down with my co-host Chad a month ago, and we reviewed 13 new G.I. Joe figures. And now here we are a month later, and I've got 12 more G.I. Joes to review. And I actually debated on holding off and doing this because I've got 2 more G.I. Joes arriving in the mail tomorrow, and I expect my local GameStop to call me with perhaps another 2 pre-orders, maybe even 3, because I have my retro card Flint and CoverGirl in the mail arriving tomorrow, and also I have pre-ordered Budo and the Desert Scorpion. I'm seeing both of those toys popping up all over, like online on social media. So even though they're not slated to release until like December 1st, those figures could show up anytime now. I feel there's something else perhaps as well. Anyway, there's no signs of stopping for G.I. Joe classified figures. So I figured I might as well just go for it, review what I have now, and if I get new G.I. Joes starting tomorrow, probably in another month, I'll be able to do another video with another 10 or so figures. It's a great time to be a Joe fan, but it's also a very overwhelming time to be a G.I. Joe fan. These things are not cheap. In fact, out of the 12 new figures I'm going to show you today, only one of them was a standard release G.I. Joe. And by standard release, I mean, so here in Canada, G.I. Joe figures retail for approximately $35, $36 plus tax. And we have a high tax rate here too. So yeah, I'm paying almost $40 for an average G.I. Joe figure. Now, I get them a little bit cheaper than that because I have a Onyx membership at my GameStop, which means I get a 15% discount. But I buy some of my figures, not from GameStop. I buy them from Hasbro. I buy them from Walmart, wherever I have to. So I don't always get them at a discount. Anyway, last time when I did an episode about G.I. Joe and Chad was on here, we actually talked about how overwhelming it was getting and that we might actually have to cancel some of our pre-orders. And I actually did cancel a couple, which sucks. I might still go back and get those items later, but we had so many items pre-ordered, and they were all supposed to arrive, October 1st, mid-October, November 1st, mid-November. These are kind of the dates that, these round dates that come in when you pre-order something. But everything was arriving early, it seemed, and everything was like premium or deluxe, or it came with a vehicle. So we'll go through all that as I show you these figures here. But the ones that I did have to cancel was the Steel Brigade Commander, I think they call him, with Bunker. So this was a Hasbro Pulse exclusive. I believe it was priced at around, I don't know, $70 Canadian, $80 maybe. So this is Steel Brigade Trooper with a little bunker. We previously got the Cobra Bunker with the Trench Viper, and the Trench Viper is cool. Same as the Steel Brigade Trooper is cool. I'm much more into collecting figures than I am vehicles and accessories, and the bunker just didn't really thrill me. So having $80, coming off my credit card with the bunker that I didn't really care about, I decided to hold off on that. Same as a crankcase with the Awe Striker. So that's the G.I. Joe Dune Buggy. It looks really cool, but these vehicles are just so big, I don't really have the room for them. This thing was priced at, I think, 125 Canadian, plus shipping. So I'd probably be in for about 140. I might even be lowballing that. But that showed up earlier than it was supposed to as well. So I held off on that. Now, let's get into the figures that I do have. So in the episode I shot a month ago, one of the figures that was due out very soon was the Snake Eyes Commando with Polar Bear 2-pack. And that was one of the sets that me and Chad had discussed. Should we maybe cancel this? Because, these things are coming out fast and it's piling up quickly. It's getting expensive. And as much as it looked like a cool set, I already have multiple Snake Eyes figures. And the polar bear, it's just a polar bear. It's cool, but it's not even a name character. Like I have a few GI Joe animals. Like I have Snake Eyes' wolf, which is named Timber, and Nagahide's warthog, and Serpentor's cobra, even. But this polar bear, the reason Snake Eyes is packaged with it is because there was one scene in one episode of the cartoon 40 years ago where there was an Arctic mission and Snake Eyes came face to face with a polar bear. So let's start with the polar bear. So here he is. So we thought about canceling the pack, but ultimately we didn't. And the main reason for that is we just kind of ran out of time. We discussed it the day we shot the video, and then I think it hit my my credit card the very next day, saying this item is ready to ship. So I didn't bother canceling it. I was like, sure, ship it, and it's cool. I'm glad I got it. This is not something you don't get a whole lot of bears in your action figure collection, and it's a good size bear. If I grab the GI Joe that he came with, so here is Snake Eyes. So this is him in his commando look, and he's colored in his Sunbow cartoon colors. So he's blue and purple, and the reason for that was, even though the original toy from 1982 was solid black, you couldn't really have the character in animation be solid black because you wouldn't be able to see any of the details. You wouldn't be able to see where the goggles separate from his mask. So they colored him blue and purple just so it would stand out. And we never got a cartoon version of Snake Eyes in the vintage toy line, but we've gotten quite a few in the years since. In the 4-inch line, they've done this version of Snake Eyes. Super 7 has done this version in both of their Ultimates and their reaction figures. So the novelty of a cartoon colored Snake Eyes is, it's kind of lost its luster a little bit, but this is still a really cool figure. The base figure, obviously we got this figure in all black initially, but yeah, this cartoon colored one looks pretty cool. And it does break up my shelf where most of my Snake Eyes figures are all variations of solid black. Maybe some of them have a silver visor or maybe some brown on the pants. They're all very dark. So to get this blue and purple version, and you're probably noticing his hot pink hands as well. That is because in that episode of the cartoon, all the G.I. Joe team is going into all these different environments to track down these rare elements. They're trying to race against Cobra to see who can get their hands on these elements. And he tracks down a radiated canister, and he has to carry this thing, and he gets radiation poisoning. And his whole body is glowing pink in the episode. So they didn't give us a full glowing pink Snake Eyes, but they did give us those bright pink hands to kind of represent that. So yeah, it's a cool figure. I like it. But yeah, the bear is arguably the highlight of the pack, just because it's something we've never seen before. And you can stand him up on his hind legs. He's fully posable. He's got ankle and knee articulation and what we'll call elbow articulation. And his head, you can turn his head right around there like that. So when he stands up, he's quite tall, and he really towers over, your 6-inch GI Joe figure. It makes for a pretty menacing bear. Now this was, as I mentioned, a 2-pack, and because of the size of the bear, it was a deluxe 2-pack. I don't remember exactly what it cost, but it wasn't cheap. It was kind of in the $100 range, I think. So yeah, this came out, and it came with a bunch of accessories. I'm not going to go through them all. One of the things of note here is it came with an extra head. So this is an extra angry head for the polar bear. Now, normally when I do these videos, I would be shooting some B-roll later, and you'd see me talking here, but then on the other half of the screen, you'd see me doing video of showing you exactly what I'm talking about. But I have found that is way too time consuming, and my heart's just not in it these days. So I'm not going to show you any video, but I will put in some still images that you'll be seeing on the side there to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about, because I know you can't see it with great detail right now. Another kind of cool little piece he came with here, it's just this extra little piece of flesh that has some arrows in it, because you can, up here on his shoulder, there's a panel that comes away, and you can see he's got this pretty gross fleshy wound there. So you can either leave him with an open wound, or you could put this other piece on there that shows he's been hit by a couple of arrows, and it shows him with a little bit of battle damage there or something. So it's cool to have that option. I can't remember what else it came with. Multiple hands, multiple guns. Yeah, everything you can need. Let's jump into another deluxe pack. This one also cost me about $100. So it was a single figure. It was General Hawk, but this figure is based on the original 1982 Hawk figure, which was like before he was a general. I think he was just Hawk back then. He was just wearing the standard kind of army green, before he went off and got his brown bomber jacket and all that sort of stuff. His more distinguished look. But yeah, me and my brother have been collecting G.I. Joes since it launched in 1982. So we had all those 1982 figures, which, by today's standards, people might think those characters are boring because most of them are just in plain green, and the only way you could tell them apart was some of them had beards, some of them had mustaches, whatever. But yeah, we love those early 1982 figures. Now, Hawk was not a figure I had. My brother Doug had it. But yeah, he's very cool. I love that he's got the clear visor that lifts up. So yeah, you can lift that up on his helmet there, or you can push that down over his eyes, just like the original figure did, and I loved that back then. He came loaded with quite a bit of accessories as well. You can see I've got him holding one gun here. He's got another gun holstered on his back. He's got all the same little pistols and knives you expect to see on all these G.I. Joe figures. Now, the reason why he was so expensive, though, is because he came with his mobile missile system, which is this bad boy here. Now, we already got this thing, I think it was just last year, but we got it in black, because when this was first released, again, going back to 1982, this came in two different colors. So it came in G.I. Joe green when it came packaged with Hawk, and then it also came in black, and that might have not been until 83, actually. But I think the black missile launcher was actually a Canadian exclusive. So a lot of you American collectors might not have had a black missile launcher when you were kids, but I did. I still have it, actually. But yeah, so Hasbro decided to release the black one in the classified series first. That came with a Tele-Viper, whereas the original black missile launcher did not even come with a figure. But yeah, so this one here, if this had come out on its own, honestly, I probably would have skipped it, even though it's cool and it's a retro vehicle and it reminds me of, when I first got into G.I. Joes. Without a figure, this thing would have probably cost about $70, and it's just not really worth it to me because I don't have the display room. But I had to get it in order to get myself a Hawk, because yeah, Hawk is a must-have. Even though I already have General Hawk in his bomber jacket, I still wanted this version 1 Hawk, because I'm hoping that they will do all of the original 13 Joes eventually. They've got to most of them. I think we just need Zap, Grand Slam, and Flash. So once they finish those last 3, I kind of hope to display my original 13 figures all kind of displayed together, maybe around the missile launcher and the Vamp Jeep and the Ram motorcycle, all those early vehicles. Yeah, pretty cool figure. It's a lot more detailed than the 82 figure. They were pretty bare bones back then. This guy's got a whole lot more going on, which is cool. But to be perfectly honest, I almost wish it was as simple as those original 82 figures, just because that really simple stripped down look is what really makes me nostalgic for the early days of G.I. Joe. And this guy here, they've added some armor to his chest, which makes sense if he's standing next to a big missile launcher. But his helmet is a lot busier too. He's got his name. You see it says Clayton Abernathy across his chest. None of that was around on the vintage figure. So it's cool. I like the improvements, but if they release this figure again on a retro card, stripped down, very simple, I'd probably buy it again, because yeah, cool figure. and I'm a sucker for nostalgia. Now, speaking of retro cards, oh, actually, last thing I'll mention with Hawk, I know I said he comes with a bunch of accessories. A lot of those accessories we've seen previously. We've got all these blast effects. So these represent like missiles hitting the ground or something. So we've got all these big kind of translucent orange explosions in different shapes. So these have come with the previous missile launcher. Some of them came with scrap iron. Some of them come with some of the larger vehicles, like I think the S.N.A.K.E and the Dragonfly might have come with some of those. And they also came with a couple of these like missile trails, I guess. So you can plug these into the back of one of the missiles to make it look like it's launching. It's pretty cool. So lots of that stuff. Yeah, so speaking of retro card, here is the one regular priced figure that I got out of this whole lot. So you see I've cut them off of the card here, but this is the retro card. You know, it looks like the G.I. Joes I bought as a kid, except, you know, 2 or 3 times bigger. You get the file card on the back. Now, the file cards are written in like 5 different languages now, so they don't have very much room to elaborate in detail like they used to. But you also see the cross promotion for the other retro card figures that are being released. So you'll see there it's got Flint and CoverGirl, which were supposed to be released in the same wave as this guy. I've had this guy for a few weeks. Flint and CoverGirl are coming in the mail tomorrow. So I'm not sure why they were staggered like that. But anyway, so retro card figure. This guy costs like $35. And here he is. So that's cool. One thing I like about these retro carded figures is they all come with a display base. I don't know why all the figures don't come with a display base, because you might have noticed when I held up my other figures, I've got most of them on bases, but this guy here, I've got his feet on 2 different circular clear bases, which are intended for one like 3 3/4 inch figure. You would put one figure on each of these stands, but I've been utilizing them like this, which isn't ideal because it does kind of take up a little extra room on my shelf. And I just don't have a whole lot of those display bases. On my Hawk, same idea, except I've got him on these little rectangular ones, which is nice because he doesn't take up any extra room on the shelf, but I also don't think it looks as nice. So I'm just kind of using whatever I have laying around. So yeah, if they gave me a display base like this with every figure, that would make my life a lot easier and would make my display look a lot more consistent. But anyway, so Tele-Viper, it's good that we've got him single carded now. I already have 3 Tele-Vipers in my collection over here on that big shelf over here, because he came packaged initially with the Trouble Bubble. So this is like kind of a little floating aerial craft. So yeah, I wanted the Tele-Viper, and he came with 3 different heads. One with like a white face, one with an African American face, and another one that had like kind of a breather mask. So I bought 2 of the standard Trouble Bubbles, so I could display the Tele-Viper with the white face and the black face, because I wanted, not the black face, the African American face, so I could have them both on my shelf together. Because he's a troop builder, you know, it never hurts to have more than one of him on your shelf. So I bought 2 of the Trouble Bubbles. And then they released the Python Patrol Trouble Bubble with the Python Patrol Tele-Viper. So I have him as well. So this guy here, I think it's great for people that maybe didn't buy the Trouble Bubbles. Maybe they were priced out by those things. So yeah, now everybody has a chance to own a Tele-Viper. I thought this was going to be pretty much the same figure as I got previously, but they did make some changes, which I didn't really notice till I got them and kind of held them side by side. The previous version has like a sealed vest, where this guy's got more like an open vest. The other guy has full sleeves. This guy's got short sleeves or rolled up sleeves. So there are some differences. The colors are different as well. Now this guy also came with multiple heads. What's interesting about them, though, is instead of giving us different skin tones, they just have different words across his visor, because that was something that you saw in the cartoon. When the Tele-Vipers appeared on screen, words would crawl across their visors like it was a ticker tape on Wall Street or something. So this guy here, I have him displayed. I don't know if you can see it there, but it says alert across his visor. Another one, I forget what it says, warning or something. And the other one is just blank. Doesn't have any text on it. So you can display it however you want. One thing that's cool about getting another Tele-Viper, though, is that now I have 3 blue Tele-Vipers, and now I can display them with all 3 heads. So if I leave this guy here with his Caucasian face, because that's all he came with was 3 different versions of the Caucasian face. Now with my 2 other ones that came with the trouble bubble, I can give one the African American face, and I can give one the like breather oxygen mask type of face. So they all display differently on my shelf, and then I don't feel so much like I've bought the same toy multiple times, which is nice. All right, let's get back to some of the more expensive stuff. Let's start with heavy duty. So this is, you probably know the character Roadblock. This is his cousin. Now, I didn't have heavy duty when I was a kid. I had 3 different versions of Roadblock. I had the original, then I had version 2, and then I had version 3, which was the Tiger Force version. And they have already done all of those versions of Roadblock and then some in the classified line. So I have 4 or 5 different Roadblocks over on my shelf already. But this is the first time that we're getting heavy duty. Now, the reason I didn't have him as a kid is because he came out in 1991. As I mentioned, I was collecting G.I. Joe right from 1982 when I was 4 years old, but I kind of got out of it in 1990. That was the last year that I bought G.I. Joes as a kid. So anything after that, I did not have. I was still familiar with them because I have a younger brother, Brian, and he was collecting G.I. Joes. Not nearly as much as me and Doug did, but he had a couple that were hanging around. I actually can't remember if he had heavy duty or not, but look, it's a fine figure. I'm glad we got him. I didn't get my first heavy duty until the relaunch of G.I. Joe in 2002. They kind of made him the more prominent character than Roadblock, because there was a whole bunch of different versions of heavy duty released in the early 2000s. And then when the first G.I. Joe live action movie came out, to my surprise, they chose to put heavy duty in there, and we didn't get Roadblock until the second movie. So it sort of seemed like they were shifting to try and make heavy duty the more popular guy than Roadblock. But now that we're in the classified line, things seem to have corrected themselves, and now Roadblock is the main guy, and his cousin comes secondary. So, fine figure. He came with a bunch of stuff too, which made him a deluxe figure. This guy costs about $60. And the main reason for that is this thing here. I'm not even going to try and put it on. It's a big old harness that fits over his head, and he wears these missiles. They're kind of under his arms, and he kind of operates it like this. It's almost like half of a mech suit, almost. It is a really big, ridiculous, probably extremely dangerous thing to wear around your waist. But Heavy Duty did it. It looks a lot like the contraption that he had in the vintage line. So pretty faithful to the vintage figure. It's cool. I think he had an alternate head, perhaps, as well as extra hands, extra guns, knives, pistols, all that stuff. So, yeah, pretty cool. Happy with him. Okay. Next up. This is another set I briefly debated on skipping. I'm kind of a completist. I want to have at least one version of every character, and ideally I would have pretty much every version of every character. If the differences are minute, I don't feel the need to buy every version of every character. Like, for example, I had the first release of Dr. Mindbender, and then they released a retro card version of Dr. Mindbender. The only difference was the first version just had a solid black cape. The second version had a Cobra logo on the back of his cape. That was a reason for me not to buy retro card Dr. Mindbender, because my figures just get displayed on a shelf. I'll never really look at the back of his cape anyway, so they would just look like 2 identical figures side by side. I need to be able to see some difference to make it worth my time. So anyway, this 2-pack, the only reason I was even considering canceling it is just because so many expensive G.I. Joes were hitting at once, and my credit card was taking a beating. And I thought, I already have both of these characters in their iconic looks. These are kind of their secondary looks, so they're not unique characters. I could probably do without, but I found a way to stick with it. So I'm glad I did, because they are both cool figures. So this was an exclusive Walmart 2-pack as part of the Walmart Collector Con. So this is a Night Force 2-pack. So this is Beachhead. So normally Beachhead has like kind of a green ski mask and brown pants. So this one here, you see he's got black pants, black ski mask, because this is meant for Night Force missions. So he's dressed for the dark. And it's a cool look. Now, I prefer his classic look because that's what I grew up with. But if by chance you missed the previous 2 Beachhead figures, then this would be a good chance to grab this one. And it's still a totally cool figure, and it's still clearly identifiable as Beachhead. He's got all of his, key things that you expect. He's got his little beret kind of up on his shoulder here. He's got his little crossbow on his backpack there. It looks good. He also came with a bunch of extra accessories too, mostly just extra guns, extra knives, all that sort of stuff. As you can see, I've got all the accessories here in these little bags. If there's something particularly noteworthy, I'll mention it, but otherwise it's usually just the same old stuff. So Beachhead looks pretty great. Now, I do find it kind of interesting that in the vintage toy line, there were these sub-teams like Tiger Force and Night Force and Slaughter's Marauders. And I don't know necessarily exactly the justification Hasbro had for picking the characters they did. Like in the case of Tiger Force, which was like the first sub-team, it gave Hasbro a chance to re-release the most popular characters like Duke and Flint that had maybe been released 2, 3, 4 years earlier, and kids that were just getting into G.I. Joe and watching the cartoons, they're thinking like, I need Duke. He's the main character. Why don't I have a Duke? So by re-releasing Duke, but now he's got tiger stripes on his outfit, that made some sense. But when it came to like Night Force, some of the choices they made seemed pretty weird. Like they repainted figures that had just come out, some either the year before, sometimes even the exact same year. Like I think Psycho came out for the first time in, what was it, 87, 88, and then the Night Force version came out at the same time. So it wasn't a matter of trying to refresh old characters. It was sometimes it just seemed lazy and nonsensical. But anyway, for whatever reason, these particular characters ended up in the sub teams they ended up in, and Hasbro doesn't seem to like to stray from that too much. Every time they reboot G.I. Joe, they do eventually do Tiger Force, they do eventually do Night Force, but they tend to only do the same characters that existed in the vintage line. And I sometimes wonder, like, why are they so slave to the ideas that were set in the 80s? Like, why not do a Tiger Force Snake Eyes? Just because it didn't exist before doesn't mean you couldn't add him to the team now. In fact, with when Super 7 was doing their reaction figures of G.I. Joe, I thought it was really cool that they added a bunch of characters to sub-teams that weren't there before. Now, their reasons were kind of obvious in that it was a cost-saving measure for them, because they started out doing all the most popular characters in their standard colors, like Snake Eyes, Cobra Commander, Destro, Baroness, Scarlet. And then they very quickly wanted to reuse those molds again and repaint them. So then we got Tiger Force, Snake Eyes, and Python Patrol, Cobra Commander, and Glow Patrol, Scarlet, and all these little sub-teams that didn't previously exist. And there might be some sticklers, like vintage collectors, that would say, hey, Snake Eyes wasn't on Tiger Force in the vintage line, so I don't want to see it in the modern line. But I'm all for it. Let's shake things up. I want to see some new stuff. I don't want to just keep buying the same stuff I had as a kid. So all that is to say that Beachhead was not in the vintage Night Force sub-team, but he was added in the early 2000s in the kind of the second generation of G.I. Joe figures. So there is precedent for this figure. It does share the same paint job as that figure that was released in, I want to say, 2002. So yeah, makes sense that we would get him now, and it's a pretty cool figure. Now his pack mate was Quick Kick. the G.I. Joe kind of martial artist. Now, his standard look is just a guy that's shirtless and with bare feet, um, just the pants and a belt, and like a headband or whatever. And so that's the look we already got in the classified line. We got that like 2 years ago, I think. So yeah, this is a new version of Quick Kick, which I appreciate because sometimes having a guy run around barefoot with no shirt on doesn't always make the most sense. So to give this more like tactical military version of Quick Kick was a good idea, but they made him part of the Night Force team, and there is no precedent for that. So this is Quick Kick's first time on the Night Force team, and that gets me excited because it shows that Hasbro is not willing to just stick with what has come before. It does show that they're kind of willing to take some new chances and maybe expand some of these sub teams and give us some new interesting looks. So yeah, this is a pretty cool Quick Kick. Now he came with some pretty cool stuff. Um, I'll show you on the inserts, but he had an alternate head. Um, and this one had some black makeup on the face. So if he's going on a night mission, it might make sense that he would put some black on his face. And I really appreciate that they gave us the two different heads because, some people might not like the black makeup, some might. But a couple of figures they've given us already is they redid Tiger Force Flint and Tiger Force Roadblock, and they only came with one head, and they put black makeup on both of those heads. And the vintage versions of those characters did not have black on their face. So, it's cool if you want to give us the option. So it can either look like our vintage toys or we can try something new. But I really don't like when you take that option away from us and say, here, deal with this. This is something new. I don't think it looks bad on Roadblock, but I really don't like the black paint on Flint's face. I think it looks fine here on Quick Kick, but I'm glad we have the option to go either way. Now, they also gave us a third head, which is very cool, which is this like masked, I want to say like kabuki mask. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I think this is the same head I think we previously got on the Blue Ninja pack, but it's just repainted to match Quick Kick's Night Force colors, and it's a very cool head. So if you're somebody that doesn't like to have the same character on your shelf twice, and I'll be honest, even though I have some characters multiple times, I always kind of struggle with justifying in my head, like, why are there two Quick Kicks next to one another? Like, and sometimes I have to make up these little stories for my own headcanon for it to make sense why there are multiple versions. This would be a really nice option if you want to just display the Quick Kick figure and say, this is just some nameless ninja, or maybe it's one of Quick Kick's, it's his apprentice or something like that. So you can put this head on it, and it definitely differentiates it from Quick Kick, which is cool. But as cool as it is, I think I am going to display it with this kind of standard Quick Kick head. All right, moving on. Next one. This was another deluxe figure. So in the like $60 price range for a single guy. But this was, I don't know if we're still calling it the 60th anniversary or the Legacy Collection or something. But throughout the classified line, they've been doing these figures that don't really have names. They're just kind of generic. So they've done the like pilot, and they've done the sniper, paratrooper. So this year we got the firefighter, and now we get the cop. So these guys don't look like military guys. These would actually be really good for just kind of filling out your civilian ranks. Like, I would have loved to have some characters like this when I was a kid, because Cobra and G.I. Joe would be fighting in the streets of New York in my mind. Really, they're just rolling around on my carpet. But if I had some cops and firefighters that could show up on the scene, and that just makes the world feel a little more lived in and stuff. So this is like, I don't think civilian cop is necessarily the term I'm looking for, but we already have a military police officer in law. So this guy here just makes for a standard city cop, or a SWAT trooper, I guess you could say, maybe. But he looks really cool, and he has a ton of display options, just like the firefighter had. I reviewed the firefighter a couple episodes ago. But this guy here, he came with two different heads, so you can display him as a white guy and a black guy. And they didn't just repaint like take the same head and paint it two different ways. Like, they're totally different heads. The black guy's got like a mustache and stuff. He came with multiple different hats and helmets. So he's got a SWAT helmet that can cover his whole face. He came with a police poncho, which is really cool. I actually didn't know what it was. It's all folded up in the package, and I thought it was supposed to be like a police blanket or something. But it was only when I saw other pictures online, people had put it over his head, and it's like, oh, it's like a raincoat for this guy, which is pretty cool. He even came with a little cup of coffee. So yeah, very very cool. And he looks good displayed next to Shockwave, which is the GI Joe SWAT trooper. And yeah, I like this guy a lot. A lot of cool little details, handcuffs and everything. Very very cool. Now, would I rather him not come with all that stuff and maybe they only charge me $35 instead of $60? Probably, because usually once I settle on a display option, that's what he's got. He's going to go on my shelf like this, and that's all it's going to be. I don't typically take my figures off and change out his accessories just for fun every couple of weeks. So, yeah, pretty cool. Let me see, what next? Okay, so I have a couple more 2-packs that I think I'll talk about here. So, this first 2-pack came with a character that I wasn't particularly excited about. So, it is Sergeant Slaughter. And you probably know him. He's the wrestler turned G.I. Joe member. Now, I like Sergeant Slaughter just fine. But the thing is, we've already got 2 other versions of Sergeant Slaughter in the classified line. And he's not one of my favorites. I didn't actually own a Sergeant Slaughter when I was a kid. My brother Doug had one. I'm always more attached to the characters that I owned and played with as a kid as opposed to characters my brother had. And there was always something a little weird to me about the fact that Sergeant Slaughter was a real person that they integrated into the G.I. Joe line that always kind of, I don't know, maybe keep him at arm's length a little bit. It was weirder to get attached to him as a real person as opposed to these made up characters like Snake Eyes or whatever. So I'm fine with Sergeant Slaughter, but he's just not one of my favorite Joe characters. And to get a third one already, it just seems like a little bit of overkill. But once I got him in hand, I actually was pretty impressed with this figure because it is not just a repaint of the previous figure. Like version 1 and version 2, they're pretty much the exact same figure. They came with some different accessories and they have different paint jobs. One guy's got a black tank top, the other guy's got a blue tank top, but it's essentially the same figure, just painted different ways. This is not the case with this guy. He has got a whole new look. I'm not sure exactly how many new pieces, but he's got a different type of he's got like an actual shirt on instead of just a tank top. I think he's got different, yeah, he's got different boots. At least these are more military boots, where the other guys had more like wrestling boots on. So it's a whole new look. And on top of that, he came with so many accessories for different looks how you could display his face. Because like the previous 2 versions, you could take his hat off and his sunglasses off. But Sergeant Slaughter's iconic look is to have that like drill sergeant hat and the sunglasses. So both of my other Sergeant Slaughters are wearing the hat, they're wearing the sunglasses, and they look basically the same. This guy did come with the same sunglasses and drill sergeant hat, if you want to put that on him. But he also came with this beret, which reminds me of when he turned heel in wrestling and he became like a member of like Iraq or whatever. And yeah, he started wearing a beret. So that was kind of weird. And then I've got him with these yellow tinted glasses, which is, I think they might actually be intended to come with the other figure that comes in this pack, but I have them displayed on Sergeant Slaughter. He also came with a kind of like ball cap. So yeah, you've got 3 different hat options with this guy, 2 different sunglass options. Actually, I think it might even be 3 sunglass options. So lots of different ways you can display this guy. The color scheme, it's kind of this desert look. So yeah, he looks like he could be in like Desert Storm or something. You could sort of say this is based off of the version 3 Sergeant Slaughter from the vintage line, in that he was in a little bit more like tan colors. But more accurately, I think this looks more like one of the Sergeant Slaughters that was released in the early 2000s. So I think that was like version 5 or 6 or something, because he had the kind of tan camo pants and everything like that. So yeah, so I think there's some precedent for this look. But the fact that you can change it up with the different hats and the different glasses and stuff make it really cool and make it worthwhile. But if they had packaged this figure by itself, I might have considered skipping it. But I had to buy him because he came packaged with Mercer. Now, if you're not familiar with Mercer, this guy is a former Cobra Viper who defected and went over and joined the G.I. Joe team. So he's got like a Cobra logo on his chest with the slash through it. And I think the vintage toy actually had a tattoo that had that. This guy does not. He's got a couple of tattoos on his arms. He's got a skull and a spider on his arm here. You can't really see that, but he's got them. But yeah, no anti-Cobra tattoo. Maybe I'm remembering that wrong, but anyway, this Mercer looks great. It looks a lot like the vintage one. I did not have the vintage one. My brother did. But these guys were introduced in the 1986 G.I. Joe animated movie. The figures came out in 1987. And so, yeah, Slaughter had his Renegades, which was these three real hard-ass guys. So it was also Taurus and Red Dog. So they came in a 3-pack in the vintage line. Now, we get Mercer with Slaughter himself. So I'm thinking maybe we'll get a 2-pack down the road that has Red Dog and Taurus. I certainly hope so, because it seems kind of weird to have one of the Renegades and not the other two. But I think you could probably ask anybody that was a fan of the Renegades if they could only have one of them, which one would they want? Everybody would want Mercer. So it makes sense that they started with the fan favorite. This guy looks great. He looks pretty stern with that expression on his face, although he does have an alternate head that has him looking even angrier because he's kind of yelling. So I kind of like the more neutral expression, but it's cool that he has the yelling face as well. What else did he have? Guns and knives. He's got a backpack. I don't know if there's a whole lot more to say about this guy, but he's getting a lot of screen time, we'll say, in the new G.I. Joe comic book from Skybound and Image Comics. So it's cool to be reading a G.I. Joe comic book and these characters that you're reading, and then you get the figure in hand. I like when there's some synergy between the media and the toys. We don't seem to get that a whole lot these days. So yeah, it's good timing with this figure to come out while he's being featured heavily in the comic books. I don't know if that was intentional from Hasbro, or they just wanted to get this character out anyway. But anyway, very cool. Glad to have him. The other 2-pack I have to talk about. This was, this was a Hasbro Pulse exclusive, I believe. So we've got a Ninja 2-pack. So this is Slice and Dice. Now, these guys are both very cool. This set is awesome, actually. It had a ton of stuff. Each guy had, I think, 3 different head options. So there's lots of different ways to display this. If I had all the money in the world, I might have bought this pack multiple times so that I could display it with all the different heads, and they could have like their own little soldiers that work for them or something. But as it stands, I'm going to display them with their basic heads. Like, this is what Slice version 1 looked like in the vintage toy line. I have the figure now, but I didn't have it as a kid because these guys came out in 1992. And as I told you, I stopped buying G.I. Joes in 1990. So my little brother, Brian, he had Slice and Dice. So I saw them around the house. But yeah, I did not have these guys. I don't have a whole lot of personal attachment to them. But I've come to appreciate them, from their appearances in like the later G.I. Joe comic books and all that sort of stuff. Plus, they just have really cool looks. Like, this guy's got what I would describe as like a fencing helmet for a face, and it's really cool. This one looks a lot cooler than the vintage one in that he's got some extra armor and lots of extra weapons that strap onto him and everything. Just very, very cool. One of the other heads has a similar silver front, but it's got a face sculpted into it, which is pretty cool. He also has kind of like a kabuki mask of his own, which is cool. Now, Dice. So I've got him displayed with his classic helmet as well, which matches the original 1992 figure. But he also came with an unmasked head. So he's just like a bald guy with a scar on his face. I can't even remember what else, but lots of cool stuff. Lots of cool weapons. Like my little bag here is just full of swords and different bladed things. Another cool thing he came with, which works with multiple heads, but it probably works best with the bald head, is this big kind of like straw hat or something. So like that's pretty cool. Now I will mention this didn't even occur to me when I was first. I got this figure and I posted it on Instagram. I noted about how cool he is, and then yeah, somebody on Instagram said to me, "It's like, oh, those teeth on the mask look terrible," and they kind of do. So yeah, he's got these like teeth sculpted like right under his nose, which make him look kind of weird. But I had assumed, well, that's what they did on the vintage toy. But then when I got out my vintage toy to do a side by side, I realized, nope, the vintage toy and neither the 4-inch toy that came years later, they don't have the little teeth on the mask. So they added that to the mask, and to its detriment, it doesn't look good. I don't think. So yeah, I wish they had left the teeth off the mask. But otherwise, this is a really cool figure. It's a really cool set. Like all those accessories, just really it's a must-have. And if by chance you're somebody that watches all my videos, you might be thinking, like, haven't I seen Mike talk about some of these figures before? And that's because my very last video that I posted a couple of weeks ago was my best of the third quarter. At the end of every quarter, I take all the toys that I bought in the past 3 months and I kind of break them down to my top 10 or 15 favorites. And the ones that I choose as my favorites advance to my best of the year video, where I will do a final elimination. And so quite a few of these figures I have had for more than a couple of weeks. So even though I haven't properly reviewed them on my channel until now, I did include them in my best of the third quarter. And both Slice and Dice advanced onto the next round because they were both such cool figures. So a lot of times with G.I. Joe characters, the nostalgia is a big factor for me. So I'll be like, I loved this guy as a kid. I loved how he acted in the cartoon, or there was a really great issue of the comic book. With Slice and Dice, I didn't have them as a kid. They weren't in the cartoons. They weren't in the comic books. They were later, but when I collected the comic books, which I stopped buying the comic books at issue 100, and I stopped watching the cartoon when the movie came out in 86. I didn't watch any of the Deke cartoons that came later, which those guys might have been featured in. I don't know. But so I don't have any nostalgic attachment to those characters. So the fact that they moved into my best of the year is based strictly on the figures themselves. And yeah, very, very cool figures. All right, I got 2 more things to talk about here. This next one is not really a figure, but in my mind, it kind of is. I mentioned before how I'm not really a vehicle guy. And if a vehicle, if Hasbro puts out a vehicle and it doesn't have a G.I. Joe figure with it, I'm not likely to buy it. Like, unless it's a really, really cool vehicle or maybe something really affordable, like a motorcycle or something. But generally, if a vehicle doesn't come with a figure, I'm not really interested in it. So this is kind of a vehicle, but this here is the Cobra S.N.A.K.E armor. Now, to me, this is just a robot, which is basically a character. So I love this thing. I had it as a kid. The original S.N.A.K.E armor was way smaller. It was about as big as up to this guy's knee, essentially. And what it was a very stiff kind of robot like this. It wasn't very movable. And he's almost chunky looking, kind of chubby almost. But the reason for that is because you took him apart and you could put a G.I. Joe inside of him. So a Cobra Trooper could wear this armor and his legs would slide down into the legs. You'd seal the shell up over his torso and you could put a guy in there. But you also didn't have to put a figure in there because it came with this kind of like rubber skeleton thing. And you could just put the piece of rubber that was kind of shaped like a figure inside of it. And that alone would kind of hold the figure together. But it was a little wobbly. The legs might fall off. This thing here is much sturdier. He's not going to like fall apart from handling him. It's very, very cool. He's got, articulation in the elbows and the hands. This is the vintage one didn't have this type of articulation. You can bend his knees, you can bend his ankles. It's super cool. And I did not expect it to be this big. It is huge. And his hand just fell off, but that's because he's got interchangeable hands. He's got like a claw and like a grenade launcher, and I think that's a flamethrower that I have in this hand here. This other one was like just a standard fist. Plug in there. So we did have two hands. If you wanted to give him two just regular hands, you can do that. But I think he had like 5 different display options with his hands. And you can put a trooper in there if you choose to. You just kind of lift these things up. The back folds open, the front folds down, and there's a seat with a seatbelt. So one of the reasons this guy is so much bigger than the vintage guy is that you can see the trooper sits in here. So the whole trooper is housed just in the torso of the figure, whereas in the old one, the figure's legs actually went down into the snake's legs, so it didn't need to be quite so big. But the fact that it has to fit a whole 6-inch figure in its torso, that means they really had to kind of upsize this thing. So yeah, it is impressive looking, compared to a G.I. Joe figure. Like, this thing, you would not want to run into that on the battlefield for sure. So yeah, this thing's awesome. It would be cool to troop build this thing, but that would be expensive, and I just don't have the room. However, there is some precedent for the snake armor to come in blue and black and red, and I would buy every color variation that they give me. So I'm not willing to go buy this thing twice, but yeah, if you change the color, you're going to get another $100 out of me, because yeah, this thing is just very, very cool. All right, and last one. So this figure literally just came today. The box, I just broke the box down here because I just opened her an hour ago. This is Pythona, and the box is really cool. Now it's got this kind of like metallicness to it, so you can see how it reflects the light there. Cool image of her on the side. Now this is a figure I was excited about, because as a kid, the cartoon series ended with the G.I. Joe animated movie in 1986. And that movie introduced a lot of crazy concepts to the G.I. Joe lore. For some people, probably people that were older than me, it was, they don't like it. They did not like the weird sci-fi elements that got introduced in that movie. And it was probably a bridge too far. People that are fans of military figures thought, like, what is going on here? Now, while I do like the military aspects of G.I. Joe, I was a little kid when this stuff was coming out, and I loved, Star Wars and Masters of the Universe. So you want to throw some cool, weird monsters into my G.I. Joe, I was all for it. So the movie introduced the concept of Cobra La, which is kind of a take on Shangri-La. But Cobra La was an ancient civilization that was hidden off in the Himalayan mountains, and they were basically orchestrating Cobra from behind the scenes. They were like pulling the strings of Cobra Commander, and they're the ones that put the idea in Dr. Mindbender's head to build Serpentor and stuff. So these were these puppet masters that we didn't know about before. And they were kind of like weird bug people. Some of them were pretty humanoid, but there was also, they rode around on giant bugs instead of having like mechanical vehicles. They had biological vehicles. They had like a big floating worm that was like a blimp, and it was pretty crazy stuff, but I loved it. And I wish we got some of those crazy big bugs as vehicles in the vintage toy line. But all we got from Cobra La in the vintage toy line was a 3-pack, which was kind of the equivalent of the Sergeant Slaughter's Renegades. So the 3-pack for this came out because these characters were also introduced in the movie. So my brother Doug got the good guys, the Renegades, whereas I got the 3-pack of Cobra La, which was the leader, Globulus, who came with a long snake body, and then Nemesis Enforcer, who had these big bat wings, and the Royal Guard, who was this kind of like bug-like trooper. And I loved those figures. I thought they were all super cool. And every time G.I. Joe gets rebooted, I'm always excited to see those characters revisited, because they did divide the fan base so much that you're always kind of wondering, like, I wonder if they're going to touch on this. Like, if they did a G.I. Joe live action movie and they introduced Cobra La, I'd be so stoked, but a lot of other people would hate it. But anyway, we haven't got the full Cobra La team again since. So not since 1987. They've given us one or two here and there, but never the full team. We've never got a secondary version of Globulus, and he's arguably the most important member. But because he has such a long, weird snake body, he's not the easiest thing to construct. He'd probably be more expensive. And so, yeah, they haven't touched on him again. We have got other versions of Nemesis and Forcer. But anyway, Pythona was the female character that was introduced in the movie, and she probably had the most to do than anybody from the Cobra La characters, because she was the first one we see on screen. She's got this huge action sequence where she busts into Cobra headquarters and then introduces herself, and she explains what Cobra La is, and she brings Cobra back to the kingdom in the Himalayas, and that's when we meet the other characters. But Pythona has a whole lot to do, and they didn't make a figure of her in the vintage toy line. And that always drove me crazy. Like, why don't we have a Pythona? And it wasn't until, what was it, 2016, I think, that we finally got a Pythona figure in the 4-inch scale. And to get that figure, you had to sign up to be a member of the G.I. Joe fan club for a year and pay the subscription fee. And then you got this Pythona figure as a bonus. So I signed up for that because I wanted that Pythona figure. So I finally got one. It took all those years. It was like 30 years after I first saw this character that I finally had it in my hands, which was great at the time. But now we've kind of moved past the 4-inch G.I. Joes, and now I'm all about these 6-inch ones. And when they did Nemesis Enforcer last year, I thought, well, that's a good sign that we're going to be getting more Cobra La. They've already announced that we're getting the Royal Guard for the first time since the original. And we got another Pythona, which just came today. So here she is. Now she's kind of petite. I was just showing you a bunch of other bigger figures. Her compared to the other guys, you can see she's almost like a head shorter than these guys, but that works, I think. She's a female. She is kind of small and wiry. She's kind of like a little ninja. So her size makes sense for me. I love the cape. I love all the sculpted detail, because the one that we got in 2016, it was basically a flat body, and then the design was just painted onto it. So there's all these like pink and purple circles. But this time we actually get cool sculpted detail that kind of has like a biological vibe to it. It kind of looks like, I don't know, crab armor. I don't know. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. The cape is pretty cool because it's got a hood. You can sort of see the hood on the back here. And it's a little difficult, but you can pull that up over her head and kind of make it work the way we saw in the cartoon. Because in the cartoon, she's introduced very mysteriously, where her cape comes up over the top of her head, and she's got a bottom part of her cape that comes up and covers her nose and her mouth. So you only see her eyes, and it's only after she pulls her cape off that you get to see that she's this like bald chick with green eyes and fangs and all that sort of stuff. So it is cool that the hood kind of works the way it's supposed to. And yeah, I think this is a super successful version of Pythona. The fact that we've got Pythona, Nemesis Enforcer with the Royal Guard on the way pretty much guarantees they have to give us Globulus, right? They can't leave us hanging. So I don't know when that will be revealed, but I can't wait. I would love to have the whole Cobra La team. And I'd love to see them expand even beyond those guys, because there were other Cobra La troopers. So yeah, give us more of that stuff. I'd love to see it. And yeah, Pythona is great. Now, she was a deluxe figure, so I think she cost me $77 when all was said and done, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because these guys here that are in the $60 price range, because they come in these big boxes, and by big boxes I mean this exact size. So she's deluxe because she comes with extra accessories, but $77, I don't know, that's asking a lot. But I didn't really bat an eye because I needed this character. And in fact, she actually cost me quite a bit more than that if you want to factor in my Hasbro Pulse membership. Because the way Hasbro Pulse works is they do have exclusive figures. And when they do put their figures up for sale, in the past, what they've done is they say this figure is now live. If you are a Premium Pulse member, which means you have a paid membership, you can buy the figure right now. If you are just a standard, just a regular shopper, you haven't paid for a membership, you can buy whatever's left in an hour. So premium members always have like that extra hour window to help them get their hands on the rare figures. And us regular folk kind of have to just hope that there's some left after an hour and that we can get one. Now, I've been lucky in the past. I'm always there at my computer and I'm ready to buy as soon as I'm able to. But I've been able to get all the other like Pulse exclusives like Nemesis and Forcer that I know a lot of other people missed out on. So with Pythona, when she went up last week, she came online at, let's say, about 2 o'clock my time, and she said available for premium members only. And I said, okay, I'm going to wait at 3 o'clock. I'm going to jump on this and buy one. 3 o'clock came, and it still said premium members only. And I was like, what's going on here? And I looked at the fine print, and it said this figure is only available to premium members for a month. She's not going up for regular sale until November 7th. That means premium members have a full month to get her. But that really worried me because I thought people are going to buy multiples just so they can resell this on the secondary market. And it's probably definitely going to be sold out before we even get a chance to buy it as a non-premium member. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to suck it up and buy a premium membership, which is $50 American, which works out to $80 Canadian. So I paid $80 to get them, just to have the privilege of buying this figure for $77, which is it's pretty ridiculous. But hopefully I can make use of that premium membership a couple more times before it expires in a year, and maybe I'll get a couple other figures, and maybe I won't have to worry so much about hovering right over the computer because I'll have that extra window of time to buy things. I have to try and find some justification in my mind for buying this thing, but anyway, she is a deluxe figure, and she does come with some cool stuff. So she comes with an alternate head. She comes with lots of alternate hands. She comes with some weapons. But the coolest thing that she comes with is all these little weird little monsters. So as I mentioned, Cobra La uses biological like weapons. So it's all like bugs and creatures. So there's like a scene in the movie where she throws a creature at Sergeant Slaughter, and it's like a squid that sticks to his face, like a face hugger from Aliens. So here we get that little face hugger thing, and it's actually got articulated tentacles. So you can move those tentacles around, so you can kind of wrap it around somebody's face, which is pretty cool. There's also this like four-headed, like moray eel thing. Now, I don't know if this thing actually showed up in the cartoon or not. I don't really remember, but it's cool. I love getting weird little creatures. There's a little crab-looking thing, which we did see in. I remember this guy from the movie. There's a clam guy. I don't know if we saw little clam guys like this, but we did see big clams that were basically, they use them as like prison cells, put people into these big clams. So yeah, all that little stuff. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't know if I can find room on my shelf to tuck the little creatures around Pythona, because oftentimes with these extra accessories, they just go in my spare parts bin and I never see them again. But with these little creatures, where they are characters in their own regard, I don't want to just put them in a bin. I kind of want to find a way to display them. So yeah, really cool. Anyway, Pythona is a great figure. Most of these figures are all pretty great. So it's been a solid run of G.I. Joe for the second half of 2025. And there's still a lot more really cool figures to come. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll probably be back with another G.I. Joe video before too long. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button and leave me comments below. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.